Hotep, greetings. It's your brother Beniti Amonray, back with another post, and I think what we're gonna talk about today, which kind of brings up a couple of different topics. Obviously, with this chaotic weekend that they call Black Friday, Thanksgiving weekend. Let's address the madness and the behavior in people, and we're gonna talk about the effects emotionally when people who are so materialistic and who gravitate on such a pure physical level and have no control over their physical emotions tend to regress and behave like animals because their pineal gland is not vibrating at its correct frequency. They're not grounded in their root chakra, and then again they're reacting like animals. It's their pineal gland is completely calcified or shut down, not working. We're going to talk a little bit about that. As we noticed this weekend, the false holiday that they call Thanksgiving, which is a time for us to acknowledge the great ancestry and history of the Moors, and the whole bullshit story about the Pilgrims and the Indians and Thanksgiving, which is pretty much a bunch of bullshit that's not grounded in any type of reality. We know the Moors discovered, cultivated North America, what's falsely called North America in the United States, correctly called the Mexum. One thing we have to get locked in our head, and this is why I say to people, and some people just don't get it, not everybody came here through what we call the slave trades. When all the masses were linked up as one, when it was all one landmass prior to the continental drift, prior to before water bodies separated the landmass, you literally had people that walked over from Africa to North America. We know them as various different tribes: the Olmecs, the Mississippians along the southeast coast, the Choctaw, the Yamasee, etc. These were all a byproduct of those Native Americans that settled here. So this is the reason why I say, and some people don't understand it, they kind of get thrown off by it a little bit. This is why I say, if you want to go back to Africa, kid, then just go. Stop talking about it. Don't stay here and talk about how bad it is here, this and that, because the freedoms that you have here complaining about the shit, you couldn't do that in most places in Africa without facing persecution. And what we have to understand is most of those places are more in Africa are more fanatically influenced by Christianity and Islam than here in America. There's no religious tolerance. Places such as Liberia are very Christianized if you've been there. Even when you go to certain parts of Egypt, as we know, are very influenced by Islam and Christianity. If you go to Nigeria, highly influenced by Islam. So we got to stop painting this fictitious picture that if we cultivate this go back to Africa mission, that all of our problems are going to go away. That's the furthest thing from the truth. Let's establish that. Number one, this place here, falsely called America, is just as much ours as people laying claim to Africa. So some of us were already here. Let's establish that. So this is just as much ours as we claim to that, because we know the Olmecs and those descendants are a byproduct of the people that cultivated this land. And then we can get back into the Moors, and we know that there's a connection with that. So this is the time to acknowledge that aspect of our history. So along with this time of year, unfortunately, comes one of the biggest shopping days of the year, which just took place yesterday, called Black Friday. And to kind of show how people are fucking animals, and I'm sure some of you watching this video might have seen the videos on the news, people fighting over sneakers. I saw one video of two dudes fighting over a pair of Jordan sneakers. I saw another video that was quite fucking disturbing. It was a group of older women. You can pull this video up. It's all over social media, Twitter, YouTube, various news outlets. There was a group of women, and centered in the middle of those women was a small little girl. And I'm going to say she's a couple years old, just by guessing looking. Small little girl. And in the video, they're fighting over fucking baby wipes. With some type of wipes. And in the melee, as these grown-ass women are fighting, you see one of the adult women snatch one of the boxes from the tiny little girl. Now, that video speaks volumes to me because it just goes to show you how fucked up people are in the head. And how crazed in the mind people get. And at the same token, these are the same individuals that profess to celebrate Christmas, which they claim is the season of giving and family and brotherly love, and then they turn around and act like a bunch of animals, which is not surprising. But the behavior, you're seeing it taken now to an all-time level of ignorance. Now, I bring that up because, unfortunately, and it's irrelevant. We won't sit there and specify certain individuals. Unfortunately, we have a lot of people who claim to be part of the spiritual conscious community that participate in these things. Okay? They, again, as I've said, so-called claim to be fighting to take down a system that they say they're totally adverse against. But then these are the same individuals that are participating in the system. And again, I'm not talking about celebrating the holidays. I couldn't give a fuck if you celebrate Thanksgiving, Christmas. It's the intent of the meaning that you put behind it. We can get into the history and the origin of the paganistic aspects of these holidays. But when you work true spiritual magic, whatever you generate it with mentally, it can mean whatever you want it to mean to you. So that's irrelevant. I couldn't care if you celebrate Thanksgiving. I couldn't care if you celebrated Christmas, but you put your own meaning behind it. Not the bullshit-ass meaning that these individuals put behind it, but more so not carrying out the negative behaviors that are associated with it, okay? And reacting like animals. What I mean by that is, let's talk about the economics of it and the systematic aspect of it. I know certain people that will wait in line, for an example, for a new iPhone or a new pair of sneakers, okay? That becomes your deity for the moment. That becomes an object that you're worshiping and craving to obtain. Unfortunately, this shit goes on. I'm talking about that aspect of it. That's when it becomes dangerous. When that type of mentality permeates your very being and your very existence to the point that you will gravitate towards violence to obtain that. That's not celebrating what they so-called claim the holidays stand for. But what I want to talk about a little bit, having said that, I just want to throw that out there real quick because since we're in this time of the season and since, this bullshit is all over the news and again, not surprising, that coupled with, again, seems like a police shooting every week now, pretty much. You're seeing how people's pineal glands are calcified. How they're reacting emotionally, and when your pineal gland is calcified and shut down, you react off of raw emotion, and it starts with the shutting down of your root chakra. And we just talked about a lot of this on the last radio show we did. One has to be grounded in that root chakra in order for the other chakras to vibrate and work at the correct capacity or frequency. There's many things one can do to stimulate that root chakra. We talked about some techniques through candle magic, the color red, or colors affiliated with mauve, brownish, red, or pinkish, which is the color symbolic with the root chakra. One can meditate and visualize and burn those colors to stay grounded in that root chakra. Because if you're not grounded in that root chakra, it's all downhill from there. All right. So what I want to do is go over some information. And let's talk about the calcinine person. All right, we're gonna take this from the Emerald Tablet Personal Alchemy for Self-Transformation by Dennis William Hupp. It says, before undergoing calcination, people are stubborn. Listen to the behaviors that are associated with people that are dealing with that calcidity in their system. They're self-centered, materialistic, fearful, and neurotic. Let's talk about that real quick. This is a person who is calcified. Okay, let me read that again. And again, I'm pointing this out because of everything that's going on right now with the holiday season, the weekend, and all the stuff that's going on in the news, the terrorist attacks, the police shootings. This is, again, as I've said, this is just you're watching a systematic plan be carried out to gain control over the masses through fear by way of their emotions for those who are calcified, or their pineal gland and their chakras are shut down and not vibrating on the correct frequency. You are the individual that's easy to reach, and you are the individual that it's easy to get the reaction out of. Okay? So let me say that again. I'm going to read this point again. It says, before undergoing calcination, meaning people that are calcified, they're stubborn, self-centered, materialistic, fearful, and neurotic. About the only positive quality that can be found in such a person is a certain practicality and prudence that comes from having their dreams repeatedly squashed. How does one who has gone through the process of calcination appear to the outside world? Now, this is now talking about somebody that's not, or has gone through the calcified process and is not under that state of being calcified. How do they appear to the outside world? It says, he or she has gained respect for the powerful hidden forces within, has lost respect for the transient and illusionary forces outside. The calcined person no longer approaches the world through the pulpit of ego, but instead has discovered the preeminence of the one thing within at the tabernacle of the soul, from which springs active participation in the course of one's life. Other people often describe being in the presence of a calcined person as refreshing. They sense the freedom of no longer having to be concerned about being manipulated or controlled by the deceits of someone's ego. It is like being in a garden where everything is growing healthily and naturally, and everyone benefits by just being there. Personal calcination produces the humility that people find endearing. All right, so now this is saying one no longer approaches the world when you are calcined or decalcified. One no longer approaches the world through the pulpit of ego. It goes on to say, this individual is no longer influenced by external forces. Their emotions are no longer controlled by things outside of themselves. When they're in the presence of other individuals, they give off a refreshing energy or a refreshing vibe, because their vibration and frequency now has completely changed. Okay? This is the purpose of becoming conscious, being a practitioner of the dark arts or spiritual magic, being an alchemist or alchemist. And we know the root word of alchemy or alchem comes from the Semitic language meaning black, cam or ham, or the Hamites. And alchem is a biblical word, and I keep telling people stop calling Egypt that, because you're still connecting it to biblical times. And Egypt, as we know, is not even the correct name, because Egypt is a Greek word that comes from the word Egyptos, which just means burnt. And it was a title given to those individuals, those Indo-Aryan invaders that came into Egypt and mixed with the original black Egyptians. They were called Egyptians or Egyptos because the sun burnt their faces. This is your Hyksos dynasty. So Egypt is not even the correct name. These are terms and titles that were given way after who these original descendants were, who were the Nubians from Nubia. Hence, that's why I call this show and this channel Mother Nubia, because Mother Nubia or Nubia is the mother of ancient Egypt. And then when you trace it back from the original Nubians, you start tapping into the Napatian culture, and it takes you even further back to who they call the Tarites, on back to the Pygmies and the Watusis, who were the individuals that they record in science and history as the Neolithics, who occupied the Nile region area before there was even Egyptian pyramids. Okay? Before there was even Egyptian civilization and culture and what we know today as Egyptian attire. This is the very essence of what we go back to and take our origin to, which, by the way, you can't put no time frame on. There's no time frame to put on existence, and this is where people get confused, constantly trying to give their theories and speculation with dates and time frames that it can only go back so far. So an individual, okay, who has now decalcified themselves has changed their vibrational rate and frequency. They are now tapped into the divine conscious. They are able to access the mental reservoir of the all. And now, rather than the forces of nature and the universes, which is in conjunction with the multiverses, instead of it working against them, it now works for them. This is what we mean when we say working true spiritual magic is manipulating the subconscious mind, or as it says in the Sith doctrine, or Sith alchemy, bending the force of the will to work in your favor. This is what this is about. When one's able to do that and put up that defense mechanism around them psychically, emotionally, spiritually, and mentally, you don't fall into that web of deceit and control anymore. Now you are in control. And regardless of what's going on externally, shit is irrelevant when you're locked in. This is what people don't understand. This is the solution to our problems. Not marching and singing "We Shall Overcome" and Ungawa, Black Power, and all that shit. That's not going to work. That's only going to take you so far. Okay? Because, well, again, as I said before, you can have a physical revolution. You got to have a mental revolution first. And unfortunately, you have some people that want to bypass the spiritual and the mental, and they want to go straight to the physical. And that's self-suicide. Okay? And we've talked about that a multitude of times about that here on this show. We've talked about it a multitude of times on the radio show. If you go back to any of our great civilizations and cultures, anytime before we went to war, there was always some type of spiritual ritual we carried out before we did it. We've lost that connection now. We're not doing it like we need to be doing it, because we have the power and the ability within ourselves, individually and collectively, to conjure up that spiritual energy, to build that wall or energy of protection, where we can become untouchable. And we're not focusing on our spiritual magic. We're focusing more on the physical. Now, they know this, and when I say they, the powers that be, that are staging all these shootings, these police shootings, these terrorist attacks, all the chaotic things that's going on in the world, the holiday season, which now, from now until through what they call Christmas and New Year's, people are going to be materialistic and vibrate on such a animalistic level, because this is the energy that controls them. So, they're controlled by, I got to have the newest electronic gadget that's out, or the newest pair of sneakers that's out, or whatever the fuck it is. These are individuals that they're targets. They got marks on their back. And the powers that be know how to reach those masses and control them, not only spiritually, mentally, emotionally, and physically, but economically. Okay? So if we want to change things and bring about change and difference, pay attention to where you put your dollars. Okay? Because we sit there and say we want change, but you can't keep going to these places and buying the cars and putting the rims on them and buying the electronics and then sit there and say you want to separate from the system. I'm just saying that to those, that have that ideology. Personally, I couldn't give two shits. You understand? Because I don't care, where you go in a sense or what you do. It's just how you do it. You understand? And it doesn't mean you can't have nice things. It just means don't be controlled by those nice things. That's the difference. You understand? But people that have calcified pineal glands are never satisfied. As I say here, they're stubborn. So on a materialistic level, these are your people that say, oh man, if I could just get that car, I wouldn't want anything else. Then when they get that car and it's not new to them no more, then they're looking for something else to quench that physical desire. It's the same thing. Could be with pussy too. Let's be real. If I could just get that one chick or that one dude. And then when we get bored with it, we ready to move on to something else. That's a reality. What we should be asking ourselves is what triggers that emotion mentally inside of our subconscious mind. You understand? How do we grasp that? Okay, how do we control it and discipline it? Now, you gotta have discipline to be successful at everything. You gotta have, as we talked about also this past week on a radio show, you gotta have a certain technique. Your techniques have to be sound. So when these things come at you, you don't just try to wing it. So you have to have a system of discipline in place. So when these things come at you, you're able to balance these things out. Now, you have to be able to appease some of your emotional desires, but not to the point where they control you. So I've talked about this before. It could be sex. It could be food. Okay? For an example with food, it doesn't mean you can't every now and then here indulge in a dessert you like. It just means you can't eat ice cream, cake, candy, and all that garbage daily on a regular basis. It's that simple. See, humans tend to make shit complicated. They tend to create their own problems. So if you are able to periodically indulge in it, you appease the desire to the point where the desire don't control you. But if you try to completely suppress it, then you tend to go on a binge. Because once you get a taste of that sweet or that certain sugar, you tend to just completely overindulge yourself in it. I'm using that as an example. Same thing with pussy or sex. Period. When you have no control over it and it controls you, you constantly become a slave to it by chasing it. And then once you get one, after that thrill is gone, you start chasing the other. I can be here all night giving you examples of that shit. These are people who's are calcified. They have not decalcified themselves. And they're vibrating on raw emotion, and they carry all those characteristics, right? I want to finish with the last section of this. Then it goes on to say the alchemists believed their operations took place on all levels of reality and looked to the stars for further confirmation of the doctrine of correspondences, as above, so below, as within, so without. That's important to understand. And understanding, real spiritual alchemy, and you're going to hear me say this a million times, and I'll say it over and over again, one should really study and master the 7 hermetic principles of Tahuti. The doctrine of correspondence is one of those 7 hermetic principles. A true master alchemist, a metaphysicist, a practitioner of the dark magical arts, really has studied those principles and made it a part of their subconsciousness, and is able to access that mental alchemy at all times and put it into perspective. That's very important. All right. The symbol they assigned to the process of calcination was the ram horns of the constellation of Aries, which now is going to tie into the deity Ra. This is important. The fire sign originated in ancient Egypt with the ram-headed sun god Amen. So now when you're working your spiritual magic under the sign of Aries, whether you're working with the planetary influences of the moon, the sun, etc., when these planets are being influenced by the astrological sign of Aries, that is a great time to petition the deity or the Ra energy, okay, or the ram-headed sun god. This would be a great time, for an example, to do a candle burning ritual and accessing the forces of Ra, becoming Ra, not idly worshiping externally the aspect of Ra outside yourself, tapping into the archetype energy of the Ra that exists within yourself. So Aries, or the ram or the bull, ties into this side, or the fire sign, okay? This is one energy that one can tap in to decalcify themselves, okay? Working with the Ra archetype energy. That shit is powerful if you really understand it, because the sun, which ties into the fire element, burns away or purifies. Not only the sun just burn, but it also can cleanse and purify. So that the symbol or the symbology of the element of fire in connection with the deity Ra is a very powerful decalcifying or decalcination process. Okay. The fire sign originated in ancient Egypt, as we just said, with the ram-headed sun god Amun, whose powers even then were associated with the emergence and assertion of ego. Astrologically, the search of the Aryan is for a separate identity, and like the sun, it exalts Aries as the most fiery of all the signs. The personal qualities of the Aryan are boundless energy and pioneering exuberance, though they can be impatient and self-centered, concentrating on future successes and ignoring their paths. And they will do battle with anyone who stands in their way. So these are characteristics of Ra also. This is the nature or the archetype energies through the constellation or the sign or the astrological sign of Aries that assist in that calcination process. So one has to know when to tap into that energy. And these are the nature and the characteristics that we just read here that is affiliated with that Ra or Aries energy. Then it goes on to say, the alchemists also associated the fire sign of Sagittarius with the incendiary fires of calcination, and the Egyptians considered it a sign of war. Okay? However, the quest of the misunderstood Sagittarian is only for wisdom. The Sagittarian is expansive, playful, brutally honest, with a fiery imagination that is often full of sexual images. But if they can control their imaginations, their outspokenness makes them excellent teachers and preachers, as well as a type of leader that never backs down. So the Sagittarian energy is also associated with the fire element. Okay, and the Egyptians considered it war, and dealing with Egyptian alchemy, it's representing the inner war that goes on in the subconscious mind, the battle of exercising one's will that one goes through on a daily basis. It's an internal war that one fights 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. Every moment you're at war, when you make the intent to make a decision, you face a war mentally, and some people don't win that war, unfortunately, mentally on a regular basis. All right. And the last section, we'll finish up with this. It says calcination is only the first step, and we'll get more into this down the road, in the process of personal transformation. This is only the first step, but is the crucial break with the world necessary to begin the work. We will continue talking about this in further discussions, but I wanted to give a brief breakdown on calcination and decalcifying yourself. This is what the real representation of this represents when you understand how to work with the archetype energies of what we call the deities. They don't exist outside of yourself, they exist within. So one method one can use to access those decalcifying forces would be through the sign of Aries, which is symbolic again of the ram, which ties into the fire element and the ram-headed god of ancient Egypt, who they call Ra. Alright, there's signs in it. Now, when you go back to the temple of Dendera, when you deal with true astrology, not that bullshit, I'm talking about these fake-ass charlatans that have been on TVs and psychics and Miss Cleo, but all that bullshit, that's garbage astrology. We're talking about ancestral astrology that goes back through our genetics by way of our ancestors, by way of charting the movements of the planets, the sun, the moon, the stars, etc. This is how we were able to decipher prophecies, number one, cycles of nature, number two, and certain periods, be it epochs or equinoxes that we were approaching when the earth was going through renewal periods, which we're dealing with right now. We are bypassing what they call epoch, which is a 50,000 year period, and the earth is going through climatic, cataclysmic, and dramatic changes. Okay, now when one is conscious of this, again, now one is working with nature, moving conducive with nature and not against it, and they're not part of these traps and all this bullshit that's going on in the world, and they don't fear what's going on. They embrace it because they understand it, because they know that this is not a time of fear and terror for these individuals or people like us. They embrace it as a great sign of change coming on the horizon, and it's a great period to look forward to moving forward. Not a dreadful period. It's only dreadful to you if you fear all the bullshit that's going on. If it troubles you and it worries you, then you should be worried because there's something within yourself that's very disturbed and out of whack, and you have not made that connection internally to balance yourself out peacefully. And when I say peacefully, I don't say that in any religious sense. I say that in the sense of what we would call balancement. You can call it ma'at, which is only one aspect of it, but remember, ma'at is useless without understanding the 7 hermetic principles of Tahuti, because the 7 hermetic principles of Tahuti and what we call ma'at work in conjunction together with each other. You can't have one without the other. So you can't just have ma'at, because ma'at is the daughter of the 7 hermetic principles when you study them and put them together. One is teaching you how to master the physical, and the other is teaching you how to master the spiritual. So this is key to understanding these precepts moving forward. So we shouldn't be afraid of anything that's going on in this day and time. We should look at it as confirmation of what we already know. Okay? And sit back and watch, and when you are in tune and you're locked in, it's like you're kind of watching a movie, or you're watching a play unfold in front of you, and you're watching the reaction instead of the proaction from individuals. Either people want to get so physical and react so emotionally that they think that's one method of handling it, and that's not the correct way of handling it. You don't have to believe shit that I say. I don't want you to. But one thing I know for sure is time is a motherfucker, and it answers all questions. So I stand firm and solid on what I teach, in the sense, because I know time will confirm it. You know, you get people that are constantly also, unfortunately, predicting all these doomsdays on the horizon, and that's a trap in itself. And that's why, if you go back and look at a previous class that I did on this channel entitled "There's No Such Thing as the End of the World," that's another mind fuck in itself. When somebody's focusing on an end, because that's another system of indoctrination to initiate what we call fear. All right. So I think I'm going to leave it there. I think we touched on a decent amount of information. So one thing one can do is to access, and I'm leaving you with this important information. I would tell people to make sure that root chakra is functioning at its correct capacity. Make sure it's working. Okay? Assist in the decalcifying process by way of the deity Ra. Access that spiritual energy. And by accessing that fire element, one can burn away, purify and cleanse themselves of the things that's keeping them calcified, that's blocking their spiritual potential. That's my best practical advice for you, especially in these days and times, with all that's going on in the news and the media, and now with the holiday season here. And those that are really fucked up in the head, as we know, in this time of the season, crime goes up. Because then you have some people that gravitate so low emotionally and vibrate so hard on the material plane that they feel obligated to have to partake in this present shit and buying stuff for people, that they go to the very extent of robbing people and stealing. And then you just have others who are pure thieves, who just see it beneficial to them to prey upon the weak and the innocent. So this is the time, tis the season to be joyful. This is the season that incites a lot of these negative emotions and reactions in people. And then you have the other people who can't keep up their obligations, who are all out of whack mentally and emotionally, and they have chemical and hormone imbalances, and they become depressed this time of year because they can't cope with keeping up with what they feel that they are obligated to. So it stirs up all types of different energies, and this is done intentionally. So it's important to consider all these things this time of year, not only for yourself, but moving forward in dealing with others. And again, as I can say, and the best advice I can give somebody, do the spiritual work. Okay? Actually put in the work. Not just reading the books, not just attending feel-good lectures that stroke your ego and make you feel good. I don't give a fuck if that offends people. I don't care, because that's the bottom line. Most people just like to go to some lecture and listen to how black and cultural they are, and it just strokes their ego. They're feeling good, but they ain't really doing shit. And again, if you get mad and you hear that, then you're one of those people. If this don't apply to you, then it ain't got nothing to do with you. But I tend to know the people that try to respond to that. They're responding out of emotion and anger because they know within themselves that that's them in that category. So when I say certain things like that, and I'm speaking to the people that get annoyed with it, if you're annoyed with it, then you're one of those fucking people, and that's just what it is. Like, I mean, I don't care how you sugarcoat it, which way you want to put it, because if you're getting emotional like that, then that's what it is. So I don't waste my time and energy on that. So it's a time, again, of the year for us to check ourselves and check others, and start bringing about a change and stop waiting for change. Because as I said, there's nothing coming for you. Okay? The sky's not going to crack open. There is no Jesus. There is no Savior coming from the sky. There are no army or legion of angels that are going to come down and fight your battles for you. There is no spaceship coming to scoop you up to take you to outer space. I don't care. To the mothership, to Nibiru, to planet Risk, none of that shit. Okay? Those are all systems of faith and belief that cannot be confirmed or proven. That's no different than Christians waiting for the rapture or to be taken up to heaven. It's no different from Muslims thinking they're going to some paradise called Jannah, to the very point where these sick fucks will blow themselves up. That's a whole nother story. The only helping hand, or the only individual that you should be looking to help, is the individual when you look in the mirror, because it all resides within you. You just got to raise yourself up to the reality of it. And if you doubt it and you say that it's not it, it's not true, then again, you're one of those individuals that, you know, are part of the experiment. You're not controlling it. It all exists within, and once one's able to tap into the divine power within, one is not able to be controlled anymore. It's that simple. All right, so I'm gonna leave it at that. Again, if you need to contact me, you can contact me at khnum19@gmail.com. If you got any questions or comments, feel free. Again, we will be doing, should have the official date. Should be Saturday, December 13th, 7:30 p.m. here in Miami Gardens. Sophia's Garden in Miami. Will be doing another class/lecture out there. The admission is free. There is no charge. We just ask that you come and support the vendors that are there. I also myself will have a ton of books out there for the event, kind of just on all the topics that we discuss here on the show. So if you are in the area or you are able to get out there, you're more than welcome to come and enjoy us. We had a great time last time. And usually some great things take place after the class. Usually we get together, do some drumming, and some other stuff. So if you're able to come out, it's usually a fun event. I definitely suggest that you come out and check that out. If you are interested in myself and any of the brothers that do the radio show to come to your area to do a class or a lecture, again, you can contact us via email. Same thing as far as spiritual readings or consultations. You can contact the email for that, khnum19@gmail.com. All right, I'm going to leave you guys with that. This is your brother Beniti. I'm Ray signing out, and I will see you on the next post. Hotep.